Addictions touch even the best Christian families right here in San Diego. This is Recovery Radio San Diego with Todd Cunningham of Pacific Hills Treatment Center and Recovery Options Network, along with John and Leslie Savage on KPRZ weekdays at 6:30. Stay with us for real-life stories, help from Christian experts, what works and what doesn't work, and local area resources for you and your family. Welcome to Recovery Radio San Diego.
Good evening. You're listening to 1210 AM KPRZ. This is a brand new radio show about addiction and self-destructive behaviors and the gift of recovery. Welcome to Recovery Radio. My name is John Savage, and I am a grateful recovering addict. And I am one of 3 members of this new local radio ministry. Recovery Radio is a daily program heard Monday through Friday at this time, and its sole mission is to assist addicts and their families by providing local professional resources to get them the help they need to live a healthy and productive life. In studio with me is my wife, Leslie, and in our trio is Todd Cunningham from Recovery Options, and we brought back Richard Perlin, First House Detox, to continue our discussions about detox, and we'll get to Richard in just a moment. But Todd, good afternoon. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me in again today.
Leslie, how are you this afternoon?
I'm well, thanks.
And Richard, you made it back. Thank you very much for coming back down.
Thanks for having me.
Well, we're gonna pick up our conversation where we left off yesterday and talk about detox. You know, my journey in recovery began for me on May 1st, 2007. It was a little over 3 years ago when I finally surrendered and met God while in a Tijuana jail cell. For 2 years leading up to that day, I had been abusing medication for my lower back pain. It began with a pain medication prescription from a doctor, and then I went back for more. And at the time, I had been managing 2 media offices, one here in San Diego and the other down in Tijuana, so it was easy for me to continue my medication abuse by purchasing drugs down in Tijuana. But in the end, I was hopelessly out of control, spending the majority of my time in Mexico to feed my addiction. I know that my family and parents thought for sure I would end up dead or find me somewhere near the border. But now I know that God had other plans for me. My turning point was there, in that Tijuana jail cell, on my knees, finally realizing that I could not stop myself, but only God could. With dozens of other locked up men around me, I surrendered and finally asked for God's help. My turning point, not only for my drug abuse and addiction, but now my renewed walk with the Lord and my new purpose in life. And this radio program is one of those purposes. Taking that first step in recovery is admitting that we are powerless over our addiction and that our lives have become unmanageable. That's where I was at the time, completely at the end of myself and unable to stop. So immediately after being released from that Tijuana jail cell, I crossed back into the United States and checked myself into a detox center. So what we wanted to do this week is talk about detox. And so, Todd, I'm going to ask you to introduce our guest.
Great. Well, we have Richard Perlin here again. He spoke yesterday on the generalities of detox. Richard is the owner of First House Detox. He serves the entire Southern California area. I know that Pacific Hills Treatment Centers brings people in from all over the United States, and he serves them as well. Richard has been working with us for, I think, 5 years, correct?
We've clarified it at just about 5 years, yes.
5 years, that's right. Well, along with Detox, Richard works with family members in coaching them through their loved one's recovery. He also does interventions. And so, Richard, what I'd like for you to do is just kind of explain to our audience who you are and what you do and, you know, whatever else you'd like to share.
Well, thank you so much, and thanks for having me back here again today and, of course, for the remainder of the week. And I am very grateful to be sober, and myself, I'm a recovering heroin addict, and celebrate 15 years of sobriety on November 12th, 2010. I'm about a week or 10 days away, and so I'm excited at that little marker along the way. And of course, you know, at First House Detox, the original business outline, on the business outline of things, revolved around providing a safe, supportive atmosphere for a person to come off either drugs or alcohol. to that end, we've designed a residential living situation where people come and stay with us from anywhere from 3 to 5 days for an alcohol detox to 10 to 14 days for the standard opiate detox, utilizing Suboxone, a detox drug that we'll talk about a little bit later, I'm sure. First House, kind of the concept behind it was to kind of take a look at addiction in its totality, understanding that the detox process, although critically important in terms of breaking the physical and addiction and the mental obsession for more drugs or alcohol, was only the first stepping stone, if you will, in the recovery chain. Our real passion there is to align families to not only understand addiction, but to empower them in terms of understanding what they can do about it. And so it is a kind of a multifaceted process, just as recovery is. And I think to that end, that all of the employees at First House, I know at Pacific Hills, and most other quality treatment centers are all inspired by the opportunity to help not only the addict or alcoholic, but of course the families that are so profoundly affected by this disease.
Thank you, Richard. Yesterday we talked about the general aspects of detox. Today we're going to focus a little bit more on prescription drug and how we detox from them. At Recovery Options Network, me and my associates, we take calls, sometimes 150 calls a day, and I can't tell you how many people are calling and say they're addicted to pain medications. That 5 years, 10 years ago, they had a car accident, hurt their back or something, and today they're calling in because they're addicted to their pain meds. Can you kind of how common is it for people to get put on unofficially prescribed medication and then start abusing that for years and years and years?
Yeah, boy, and of course we take those same sort of calls, and it's particularly compelling aspect of addiction. Many people have led just quality lives and then are involved through a series of events and perhaps a traffic accident or some other accident. Maybe it's a disease that they've encountered in their personal circumstance. And doctors, in treating this pain, have actually created addicts. And certainly most doctors are well-intentioned in that regard, and in terms of trying to save their patients from falling victim to addiction. I think it really, what I want to say on that subject is it's really important that we understand that an addict is an addict is an addict. And by that I mean that once you've become physically addicted to pain medications, whether you have that in your past or not, you are an addict, and at that point you're going to need to seek professional help to break that cycle. I think a lot of people kind of fall victim to the mentality that says, look, I've lived this quality life. I would never do drugs. And through, as I said, this misfortune, personal misfortune, they've actually been transformed into an addict. And boy, once you've crossed that line, you really need to look at it for what it is, or you will never break that chain.
You're listening to 1210 AM KPRZ. This is Recovery Radio for San Diego. Let me just quickly drop our telephone number in. If you have questions about recovery and your options for recovery, you can call Todd at area code 949-973-9140. That's 949-973-9140. If you'd like to drop us a note, it's recoveryradiosd@gmail.com. That's recoveryradiosd@gmail.com.
I have a quick question. It seems to me that painkillers and anxiety medications seem to be the most abused drugs, prescription drugs, that we get calls on. Do you feel the same way?
Yeah, I think that a lot of people. Yeah, I mean, the cycle of addiction kind of perpetuates itself. Once a human being becomes addicted to pain medication, for instance, and a doctor, for example, or a spouse or loved one might say, "Hey, look, you're taking too many of these, etc." That immediately produces anxiety. People that have led a normal life up to that point, they don't really understand addiction. They don't understand the physical and mental reliance that these medications have created within themselves. And so, in order to, it's a very difficult proposition for an addict that doesn't have a basis for that addiction in their personal experience. In other words, what I'm trying to say is that a human being that does not have personal precedent in their life for addiction is really absolutely powerless in terms of combating that without professional help. And of course, to step back from that active addiction for a moment is very difficult, because what are we really saying to John or Jane Doe? We're saying, hey, look, stop taking the only thing that provides you relief. And so it's a very difficult transition to make. And I guess what I would ask people to do is to consider their personal circumstance. Can they even envision living without these medications? Do these medications take away more from their life than they bring to it in terms of pain relief? And to talk freely and openly about where they're at. You know, one of the great big stigmas about this, as you can imagine, is that people that have led a good life and now all of a sudden they turn around and they are addicted. You can just imagine how difficult it is for that person to even entertain the idea that they might have become a drug addict. And so we really encourage people to talk openly with professionals in regard to, hey, what can be done about this? And I think through that series of conversations, people would immediately find out that not only is there help available, not only is there many people that suffer the same quandary that you're in, but there is a way out. And so I really encourage people to talk about their situation first. We can't effect any change as human beings unless we're willing to address it. And so that's kind of really what we're looking for, is people to kind of open that dialogue and say, look, this is who I am, and this is what I want for my life. And that doesn't really sound like detox in a conventional sense, I know, but we're at that point, we're really kind of getting down to the essence of recovery.
Mm-hmm. Leslie has a question.
I'm just wondering, what are the most common prescription drugs that are being abused that you find coming in?
Well, a typical case that comes to us might be somebody that was underwent a surgery, for example, and was prescribed Percocet. If it's a particularly serious surgery, they might have been prescribed Oxycontin. And over a period of time, I think what people don't realize is that if you take Oxycontin for 10 days in a row and then try and stop on the 11th day, your body is going to rebel from that. And I think there's enough information out there in the medical community where they prepare people for the physical withdrawal aspect of the cessation of these medications, but not enough done in terms of the mental support that is required and or the recovery support. As I say, once you kind of step over that line and you become physically addicted, and that mental obsession kicks in for more medication, you're going to have to deal with it. And of course, the longer you're on these medications, even if it's for legitimate reasons, you're going to often require professional help to break that reliance.
You know, I agree with that. For me, I was on Oxycontin for a long period of time, abusing it. And the biggest hurdle for me when it came to the point to where knowing that I needed to stop was the mental part of it.
Yeah.
I could probably get through the physical part, but it was really the mental part that was really the challenge for me. Did you have a follow-up question, Leslie?
Well, unfortunately, a lot of these drugs are getting into the hands of people who actually haven't been prescribed or have pain, but they're using them, children of people who are legitimately using these drugs. How many of those cases are you finding?
Oh, it's a gigantic problem, and I the statistics, OxyContin, for example, is the number one, and I hesitate to throw out statistics because I'm not good at retaining them, but I know it is the number one problem in the United States of America in terms of addiction for youth, and certainly the number one killer. It dwarfs heroin overdoses in the United States of America right now. I think people would be surprised to learn that these prescription drugs are more dangerous than street drugs, and that's primarily based on their purity, their easy access, certainly the ability of people. They're more cost effective, if you will, than you're not having to smuggle drugs in from tens of thousands of miles away. These are available down at the corner drugstore, and so in terms of access to young people, these drugs are truly a scourge.
Coming up on November 16th here locally, Channel 51 KUSI is dedicating 2 hours from 8 until 10 o'clock to the OxyContin issue that's going on in our high schools today. So that's going to be a special on November 16th on KUSI in the evening. So if you want more information, I think it's a great public service that Channel 51 is doing about the oxy problem in the community.
That's great. I have a quick question. If you're prescribed a medication for anxiety, and say you're on Xanax and you're taking this for high levels of anxiety, how does a person know, or how does a loved one start to key in on some of these early signs that they're not taking the prescription for anxiety any longer? They're taking the prescription for maintenance purposes.
Well, right, of course, and generally, a family member is going to start to identify some sort of dysfunction, a reliance on these medication that extends beyond just a doctor's orders, so to speak. Oftentimes, people that have problems with these anxiety medications will combine them with alcohol to kind of exacerbate their effects. Certainly, one of the great tip-offs is people not being able to honor commitments, kind of getting back to the unmanageability that we talked about briefly at the beginning of today's show. And so all of these are danger signals, but with the resources that are available in our community, I think, a lot of what families have to get past is the stigma of talking openly and honestly about these things. We've given out phone numbers repeatedly during this show that a family member can call up and find out and discuss a problem or a potential problem. If at the worst that's going to happen in that scenario is somebody's mind would be put at ease. So I think that there's a lot of red flags, if you will. Some of them are easily identifiable, maybe a DUI, maybe somebody running out of a prescription or a change in a person's personal demeanor, and many of them much more subtle. Just people forgetting about things, et cetera, maybe a somewhat over-reliance kind of under the heading of, I've got to go down and get my pills. And so, I always tell families or counsel families, look, trust your instincts. If you perceive there's a problem, there quite probably is.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And, that's the main purpose of this show. And when Todd and Leslie and I began to talk about bringing this program to San Diego, it was because no one really wants to talk about recovery or addictions. It's the taboo out there. And so if you have questions about recovery or getting help for your addiction, you can call Todd at area code 949-973-9140. You can call Todd anytime with questions, 949-973-9140. 9140. You're listening to Recovery Radio on 1210 KPRZ.
Real quick, Richard, we've talked about recovery options and we're giving the phone number to call out. And to this point, I've been kind of the only one, and John talked about recovery options. Maybe you could speak to recovery options a little bit. You work with the people that are actually taking the calls. Could you explain to our audience, from your point of view, when somebody calls in, who are they going to be talking to from your side?
From the detox side?
Correct.
Yes.
Recovery Options calls you,
right?
Multiple times during the week, from the crisis counselors, and these are the people that are answering the phones and
right.
the caller.
The typical call that comes to us from, and I think I understand your question, I hope, but it gives me an opportunity to kind of talk a little bit about your center, Todd. The typical call that comes to First House would be a intake coordinator from over at Recovery Options, Pacific Hills primarily, and that person would call me and say, "Hey, Richard, I have an opiate addict from the Midwest that needs detox prior to entering Pacific Hills." And a lot of times, because detox is, there's a lot of anxiety. Talk about anxiety. How about saying, look, I'm going to give my life over to treatment. I'm going to look at the world a whole different way. And, of course, all the fear associated with entering a treatment facility to effect that change. The typical call would come to me, and I would pick up the phone and call that potential client personally with the intent of kind of explaining the detox process to them, putting their mind at ease. Oftentimes, because families are so intricately involved in the recovery process, or should be, I will talk with the individual family members that are most concerned, let them know that they have an open line of communication to me directly during the detox process. And of course, and as they go through this process, questions do come up. People's lives are in flux at that point. There are issues that need to be resolved, and so we try to keep that kind of that open channel at First House with not only Pacific Hills with their ultimate destination, but with the family and the addict or alcoholic as well. I hope I answered your question.
You did. What, Richard, we were speaking during the break time, and I'm going to kind of talk about Pacific Hills and how they've come to bring to us some scholarship programs.
Oh, yes,
all
please.
right with John. Pacific Hills is offering scholarship programs to the local churches and businesses, and what we're doing is we're providing a matching scholarship, dollar for dollar, for somebody that needs to get help. Richard had mentioned that he would agree to do the same thing since we're focusing on the topic of detox. So if there's anybody out there that needs some help, some guidance in the area of detox, maybe some type of financial assistance, and you're affiliated with a business, your employer, or you're going to church, give us a call. Let's all hook up together and figure out how to fix this person, get them onto a new life, so that they've got a bright future.
Thank you, Richard, for doing that.
No problem at all. And most people that work in this industry and are truly inspired by it are always looking for opportunities to give back on some level. So glad to be aboard.
Thank you, Richard.
And it's important to note that you have to be detoxed prior to entering most treatment facilities. So it's an important element that you go through a detox professional services and then you enter treatment. So what we're saying here is that we have the Pacific Hills scholarship program, and now we have, through your generosity, something through First House, and I really appreciate that.
Our goal is to provide the full continuum of services through this program. I'd like to mention real quick is, you can go to some treatment centers and they're doing their own detox. Pacific Hills has elected not to do their own detox because they believe that they do what they do, and they do it very, very, very good. And we also depend on Richard to do the detox, and he does that very, 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 very good. And so it allows for us to function in an environment that we can focus on what our tasks are in order to get these people healthy. So
very good.
Give us a call. Let's see what we can do.
And let's go ahead and give that telephone number out.
949-973-9140.
Very good. You're listening to 1210 AM KPRZ. This is Recovery Radio for San Diego. And we, throughout the last couple of weeks, we've been giving you our email address for comments. It's recoveryradiosd@gmail.com. That's recoveryradiosd@gmail.com. I just wanted to read something real quick here before our time is up. This comes in from somebody up in North County. I'm a regular listener to 1210 KPRZ, and I was so pleased when I came across your program. My wife and I listened together and were similarly intrigued the following night. I'm so happy to finally hear frank and accurate dialogue about addictions and the path of recovery on the airwaves. Very nice to hear. So we welcome those comments from you out there. And again, the email address is recoveryradiosd@gmail.com. Leslie, did you have any follow-up questions before we end the program for the day? Well, we can always pick it up again tomorrow.
Let's do it tomorrow.
Okay, we will do it tomorrow. Richard, thanks again for coming down. We're going to pick up our conversation about the detox process and talk a little bit more in depth about that. You're listening to 1210 AM KPRZ. This is Recovery Radio for San Diego.
Addictions touch even the best Christian families right here in San Diego. This is Recovery Radio San Diego with Todd Cunningham of Pacific Hills Treatment Center and Recovery Options Network, along with John and Leslie Savage on KPRZ weekdays at 6:30. Stay with us for real-life stories, help from Christian experts, what works and what doesn't work, and local area resources for you and your family. Welcome to Recovery Radio San Diego.